Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Barrister Blessing Chinaza Ibenewu, and I want to welcome my new family, my new followers to this episode of Blessing Talks Law. And before I dive into today's topic, I want to thank every one of you that has been liking, commenting, reposting, resharing my videos. I really appreciate. Thank you all so much. Today's topic is very interesting, so I need all your attention. Yes, I need all your attention. So we'll be talking about rent increase by landlords. I noticed that the past few days, most of our top celebrities, especially in Lagos, they just been complaining about how landlords increase their rents and all that. And everybody has one or two things to say, but the main thing is, what is the law saying about it? Yes. Now, one of the most common cause of conflicts between landlords and tenants today is because of rent increase. Many landlords believe that since they own this property, they have all the right to increase their rent at will at any time. You understand? And also some tenants feel like, since they, are tenants in this building or property, and there's no need for them to be, their rent to be reviewed. Do you understand? Most people, you will stay in a property and expect to pay the same rent for like 10 years, 15 years. No. So now, both positions are actually incorrect. Yes, both positions are incorrect because the law does not prohibit rent increase. It actually regulates how and when it can be done. Yes. Rent increase is lawful but not arbitrarily. A landlord has the right to review rent. However, this must be exercised in accordance to the law. A landlord cannot wake up one morning and decide to increase rent for his tenants. No. Simply because they feel like the property has gone up in value and his tenants can now be able to afford more. Rent increase has to follow due process. Landlords can't just wake up and increase your rent. It must follow due process. Another thing I want to tell you is that there must be a proper notice from the side of the landlord. It is mandatory for landlords to notify you of their intention to increase rent. Before any rent increase can take off, the landlord must issue a valid notice of rent increase to the tenants, and the notice must be in writing, clearly stating the new rent. And also, you must give the tenants a reasonable time, to prepare ahead. When tenancy is yearly, the notice is usually tied to the expiration of the current tenancy, meaning demanding rent in the middle of an existing tenancy without period notice is very unlawful. Also, it is also important to know that a rent increase becomes effectively only when the tenant agrees, either expressly or by conduct, meaning when the tenant goes ahead to pay the new rent. And whereby the tenant refuses, the landlord cannot force payment. There are other lawful options available to the landlord where the tenant refuses to pay rent and refuses the increase in rent, which is one, negotiation, and two, issuance of a proper termination notice in line with the provisions of the law. No punishment will be meted on any tenant simply because he refused to pay the rent increase. A tenant who refuses an unlawful or improperly introduce rent increase, 1 must not be harassed, 2 must not be threatened, and 3 must not be forcefully ejected from the property. Any form of self-help eviction in response to refusal of the tenant to pay the increased rent is illegal and punishable under the provisions of the law. There are actually consequences of ignoring due process, where a landlord goes ahead to increase the rent of his property without following the due process. There are actually consequences. Landlords who increase rent without following the law may risk losing eviction cases, being ordered to pay for damages, and facing criminal liability in case of harassment or illegal eviction. Tenants, on the other hand, who ignore lawful notice may also lose their protection under the law. So in conclusion, rent increase is never a problem. It's not a problem. The problem is how it is being carried out. The law exists to balance the rights of landlords to earn from their property and also the rights of tenants to be treated with dignity and fairness. So as a property lawyer and a real estate consultant, my advice is simple. Follow due process, seek legal guidance early, and prevent disputes even before they arise. Thank you. My name remains Pastor Blessing Chinanza Ibenewu, and I'm from the Temple of Blessing Talks Law. If you have any question or comments, kindly send me a DM. Thank you. Bye.